It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
Welcome back. This is episode number 2, Beneath the Helmet. I'm your show host, Arjuna George. This episode, I have the real honor to meet with Jeff Dill, who holds a unique position of Behavioral Health Administrator for the Las Vegas Fire Rescue, and is also the founder of the Behavioral Health Alliance. Jeff holds a degree in counseling and is a retired fire captain for the Palatine Rural Fire Protection District in Illinois. Jeff is an educator and ambassador for suicide prevention. His knowledge is vast and shares some real nuggets of wisdom for us all to consider. In this conversation today, we discuss a topic near and dear to myself, moral injury. I know I was challenged with moral injury in my career as a firefighter and want to ensure that information reaches the masses. Jeff was part of an amazing team who recently published a white paper on moral injury called Wounds of the Spirit, Moral Injury in Firefighters. We also go on to discuss other topics such as suicide and fire service culture. Jeff is an exceptional man, exceptional leader with a true passion for supporting his fellow first responders and firefighters. We hope you enjoy this episode, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as your favorite listening platform. And until then, stay well. Enjoy the episode. All right, Jeff Dill, what a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, Chief, it's an honor to be here, sir.
I really appreciate it. I think the audience would love to hear who Jeff is and what's your background and where do you come from and what brought you to where you are today.
Well, I think I'm 61 years old and I'm still trying to figure out who Jeff Dill is.
Maybe we'll figure it out tonight.
Well, hopefully, maybe, but I'm not paying you as a counselor fee or anything. To give you a quick background, my fire service and things, but I'll start early. I was born and raised in Rochester, New York, and after 18 years, I didn't want to go to college. Didn't want to work at Kodak and Xerox and all the Bausch and Limes. So I went out to Chicago where my dad's brother, my uncle Tom, lived. And about 3 months later, I met my wife at a party. And a year later, we got married. And 2 years later, we had our first daughter. We have 2 daughters. And then I had a full-time job always, but I was doing a lot of part-time jobs. I was a broadcaster. I used to cover the Chicago Bulls and I'd interview Michael Jordan.
Oh,
I worked
jealous.
It was fabulous. I worked for a minor league ball club, the Baltimore Orioles out in that area. So I worked part-time on the PGA Tour for 10 years. So real estate, but I always had a full-time job driving a truck until my father-in-law and we built our first house out in the rural parts of Elgin, Illinois area. And my neighbor came over and he said, "Hey, we're looking for some volunteer firefighters. Are you interested?" And I thought, well, I've tried everything else, so I might as well try that. And absolutely fell in love with it. They put me through the fire academy, EMT, paramedic class, officer classes, moved up to a lieutenant. And then in 1995, after having 5 years as a volunteer, I decided to test. And I was getting older. I was 33. 35 is the cutoff. And I was fortunate. A new department was being founded called Palatine Rural Fire Protection District, a major northwest suburb of Chicago. And I was fortunate to be one of the founding members. And I moved up pretty quickly. After a year, I was made a lieutenant. And about 2.5 years later, a captain/battalion chief, and appointed to the battalion chief. And I held that position for about 12 years. And then we dated with surrounding departments. And so I was promoted to assistant chief. That lasted 1 year. And I said to my chief, I said, "Hey, you know what? We have an opening on one of our engines, engine 36. Do you mind if I go back to my tested position?" Because they'd put me on days. And I was traveling at that time with FBHA, and it really limited my ability to get out there and do what I love. And that's educate our brothers and sisters. In 2013, I went back to my captain's position. And in 2015, I retired and started doing FBHA full time. And then in 2021, my wife and I sold our house in Branson, Missouri. We were going to hit the road with our truck and camper and travel across the U.S. We did it in 2017. And we put on over 40,000 miles visiting our brothers and sisters in America and just talking about behavioral health and suicide awareness. And that's when a friend called from Vegas and said, "Hey, there's a behavioral health administrator position open." And so I thought, I'm a firm believer in Maslow's pyramid, self-actualization, and take what you know and pass on to others. And I've been blessed to learn so much in this behavioral health realm that I applied for it, and I did get the position. I started July 1st of 2021. So I'm doing that as well as traveling with FBHA.
So that position you're in right now, I don't know if too many listeners are familiar with that because I've never heard of that position before. So what's the job there? What's your
Well,
role in that?
the bottom line is to take care of the 700 firefighters and as well as the staff of another 100 or so, 150, and taking care of their behavioral health needs, providing resources. I run the peer support team. I help kind of make sure that we all unify and work together, the surrounding departments, including 2 Air Force bases. And it's taking care of the families, crisis situations. So it keeps me pretty busy as well as getting out there to the stations. We have 21 stations and the 3 shifts. So it keeps me busy. The day is full. There's no doubt about it.
Hmm. Is that kind of position, is that common in the States or?
It's not common, but it is growing. There's no doubt about it. I'm not an EAP. We have an employee assistance program, but I'm hired by the city of Las Vegas Fire Department to take care of our brothers and sisters, create policies, do some educational training of the members, including officers, the academies. And so one of the things I decided when I got there was to implement FBHA's 12-point plan of creating a behavioral health program. And so just because an organization has an employee assistance program and a peer support team, that it takes more than that to have a behavioral health program. I implemented the 12 points. We have one more to go, and we're working right now on that. And that is a retirement program. How do we prepare our people for either on-duty disability or if they resign, fired, or when they retire? What does that look like? So we're working in earnest to put that together.
Yeah, that's such an important topic because unfortunately, sometimes when you retire, it's just kind of like it's one day you're at work, next day you're at home. So that's nice to have some sort of transition and some idea of what's coming down the pipe.
Absolutely, it is. And my wife just sent me an article, a Harvard study about retirees that's overlooked so much, and that is the social gathering that we've had in this position. And all of a sudden, next day it's gone.
Yeah.
So
For
you're
sure.
left your friends, your brothers, your sisters that you worked for all these years as both either a volunteer or career. And so it becomes a real issue of isolation as well. So there's a lot to think about when we talk about retirement.
That's so good. Kudos to Vegas and yourself for being proactive, I would say, in this regard. So kudos to you, both of you. So
Thank you. Appreciate it.
tell the listeners a bit about the Alliance and what that entails and who that supports.
It's what a journey it has been, Chief. There's no doubt about it. I was just cruising along in my fire service career, like I said, doing part-time jobs. Then in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit and devastated New Orleans and the Southeast. And so Division One outside of Chicago sent down numerous firefighters to help out our brothers and sisters in New Orleans and the community. And when they came back, they showed me just pictures and videos of the devastation. They were picking up bodies in the streets. And so they were dealing with some trauma. They decided they wanted to go to their employee assistance program counselors, good people, but this was 2005. And we never allowed anyone in to talk about behavioral health. So these unfortunate counselors had no idea about our world. So the firefighters became frustrated and they were searching. And I thought, how can I give back to my brothers and sisters? So I decided to go back to school and I got my master's degree and I became a licensed counselor. Then started practicing and teaching. And in fact, in 2009, my wife and I founded Counseling Services for Firefighters. This was an organization where we trained counselors and chaplains. Hey, you want to work with us? You need to understand this. We're a little different. Not that it's wrong from my point of view, but we're a little different.
Yeah.
And then in early 2010, I started receiving emails and phone calls from all over the world saying, do you do anything about firefighter suicides? And this was Australia, Africa, Ireland, England, Finland. In fact, the author from Finland, she was writing a book on first responder suicides in Finland. She called me and interviewed me for about a half an hour. And many months later, she sent me the book. It's in Finnish. I don't understand a single word it says, but I do see my name in English in there. So I hope she quoted me right.
Yeah, exactly.
As well as Canada and the United States. And like I said, it's suicides, man. We have firefighters that kill themselves. This is the greatest job on earth. The more I started doing research and digging into just some data and just, it was incredible how many I found. I thought, we have a problem here.
Mm.
And so in 2010, mid 2010, my wife and I founded Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. Her name's Karen. We've been married 42 years. And so,
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank
Yes.
you. But it's just amazing, this journey. And that's when we started tracking and validating fire mass suicides here in the States. And yes, we have 75 that I have validated from Canada. I have several from Europe of brothers and sisters I know that live across the pond, and just validated some of those, but not as, I would say the amounts aren't as great as what we have here in America.
Yeah, I think we'll touch on some suicide stuff shortly, just to kind of, I think that's a topic that we tend to shy away from as a fire service, even the word suicide
Absolutely. Not only in the fire service, still in society.
in society. Yes, for sure.
Mhm.
But first, I want to dig in because I know recently there's been a white paper going around that's been very popular and it's been shared across the fire service to all the brothers and sisters, North America for sure, about moral injury. And I
Yeah.
know for myself in my book, Burnt Around the Edges, I talk about moral injury as something I came across when I was doing my own research on my own self care, my own burnout process. And I came across the word moral injury, and I really, honestly, I'd never heard of it before. I dug into it, and I was almost positive that moral injury played a huge part in my early retirement. And then after that, I've been talking to other firefighters and chatting about what moral injury, in my view, is. And pretty much everyone I talk to has no clue, has never heard of the term before. So I think your white paper came out perfect timing. I think it's a very important topic. So I'd love to dig into that a little deeper and get your points on moral injury.
Absolutely. Just yesterday, I was speaking up in South Dakota at the National Volunteer Fire Council's Wildland Symposium. And I asked the group, there's about 40 of them, and I said, has anyone heard of the term moral injury? And not one person raised their hand. And it's because it is new. It's not new in terms, the military has been studying it for a while. And we started seeing last year, a couple of years, the term once in a while pop up here in the first responder world. And that's how I came to know it. A couple of firefighters here in Vegas called me out to one of the stations and said, Jeff, we'd like you to watch a video. And it was a doctor doing a TED talk about moral injury for first responders. And they asked me, he said, have you heard of it? And I said, well, being a licensed counselor, yes, I've heard of it, but it was never really studied because it's not the diagnostic statistical and manual that the counselors use for diagnosis and treatment. Knowing who I am and digging into research to make sure everything's always accurate, found out very quickly that Dr. Shea, that's SHAY, was credited with the phrase moral injury many years ago, and started really looking more and more. And I found that Dr. Bruce Litz out of Boston University, who I've had several conversations with, him and his crew, they created the moral injury outcome scale. And I thought, you know what? We need to, as I heard more and more about it, we need to do a white paper on this. And so I asked Dr. Litz for the survey. We put together some geographical first questions, a couple of questions, and then we sent it out to 10 departments. We wanted a minimum of 500 subjects to take it confidential. And thought, that's great. I can't write a white paper because I speak and write from my heart. And so I have a great friend, Dr. Liz Fletcher, who said, hey, Jeff, I'm a volunteer, but I'm a doctor. I've written white papers. So I just kept on feeding her information, and she so eloquently put it together where a white paper should be. And then we thought we could look at the surveys coming back, but we wouldn't understand them on moral injury. So I happened to come across a chaplain, Chaplain Mark, and his last name, you'll have to look at the moral injury and understand why I don't want to butcher that name. But he said, yes, he said, I would love to be a part of your team to put this white paper out, Wounds of the Spirit. So he interpreted the surveys for us, and it was just a tremendous partnership. And for those who don't know what moral injury in reality is, The belief is that we are all born as human beings to want to help. It's inherent to help others, to be there. And then you get into the first responder world and you're trained to save lives, to be there and help others in their time of need. As you know, Chief, our percentage rate is very low in saves in reality. And we see more and more death, and that starts giving us that feeling of helplessness, that are we really doing good like we had hoped to? And so one of the big issues of moral injury is betrayal. Betrayal by management, betrayal because management promised us more work. We wouldn't have to do all this overtime, maybe better equipment, maybe better salaries. So we feel betrayed when something happens, or betrayal by others. That maybe our brothers and sisters we work with did something to kind of make us look bad, or maybe our loved ones decided to get a divorce, maybe because of our actions, whether we had the way we treated them, or an emotional or a physical affair, because we know divorce rates are 60 to 65% in the first responder world, or betrayal by ourselves, where we actually went out and had that affair, or maybe we saw someone being bullied, or maybe we saw someone being harassed and we didn't say anything. And that leads to that guilt. And guilt is a major part of moral injury. So where moral injury or where PTSD is fear based, moral injury is more emotional based. And that's that wound of the spirit, feeling helpless, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, feeling helpless. And so when I started talking to the military and doing studies on this for years, come to find out that you can have both PTSD and moral injury at the same time. The problem is that a lot of our counselors, clinicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, they're always looking at the PTSD and not the moral injury, because like I said, it's not the DSM-5. And when I asked the military, when you looked at your data, where's the highest correlation of suicides to? And they said, there's no doubt about it. It was more towards moral injury than PTSD. And so when I looked at my data, right now we're at 1,853 air DMS suicides. And for me to validate, let me sidestep this real quick. We track career, volunteer, wildland military firefighters. We track EMS, which is private ambulance service for us, and dispatchers. So when I started looking at the data, and we get confidential reports that come in off our webpage, but because a lot of people know me, they will call me or text me and say, "Hey, Jeff, we just lost someone yesterday, took their lives." I then contact the fire chiefs, the chief officers or supervisors. So out of the 1,853, I've personally spoken to about 1,800 chief officers to validate the data, to hear the stories, the methods, the reasons. And so we know that the number one reason is unknown. Families and the chiefs just didn't know. But the number one known reason is relationships, whether it's personal or work related with our relationships. And so when I started seeing this and I'm starting to really study and thinking about this white paper, I'm starting to believe more and more that maybe moral injury plays a large, if not larger role than PTSD in our brothers and sisters. And I think that's what the white paper is showing, or it did show. And so we are now have on the drawing board a white paper too, and we're going to make it a more of a, there's a term to make it a doctoral paper so that it can be published in like the American Journal.
Right. Yep.
So we are working on that aspect, in the Shea Center. The Volunteers of America and Shea Center want to help us with that, with any information that they have. And so we are going to set the minimum at 2,500. So we'll be sending these surveys out to fire and EMS organizations, both career and volunteer, all over the U.S. And so we'll be starting work on that pretty.
Once again, kudos to you for spearheading this, because I think, once again, this is a topic that super important, I think, for the fire service, let alone emergency services, let alone the world, to understand this emotional damage, the emotional injury to our heart. That's how I put it, was it's an injury to the heart. Are there any other ways to frame it for firefighters to kind of understand it? Is it a definition or?
Yeah, I think it's more of that understanding that, and let me give you an example. Back in 2011, our first grandchild, she was 22 months old when she was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, cancer of the eye. And, it's one of those calls you never forget when your daughter calls you and says, Dad, Lily has cancer.
Wow.
You can remember that for the rest of your life. So a week later, they had to remove her eye because half her globe was encapsulated with the tumor. And they wanted to get down the optic nerve into the brain. We were still in the shock of this cancer diagnosis that we are now having our granddaughter have her right eye taken out. And I took a video of her playing in the nurse's station before the surgery. And even now today, when I watch it, it's hard to fight back the
Mhm.
tears.
I bet.
But when the doctor picked her up and took her through the back door for surgery, to hear my daughter wail like I'd never heard anyone at any scene. But that didn't bother me the most. What bothered me the most was my thought process. I'm supposed to do something here. I'm supposed to do something to save my granddaughter's right eye. And I'm thinking the audacity. You never even heard of the disease until last week. And for all these years, I always thought that's my PTSD. That's my trauma. And now I'm starting to realize that it's more of a moral injury aspect of it, that thinking, that thought process, that I'm supposed to protect the ones that I love. And so it's amazing how we can go on these calls and we can feel things. And Chief, as well as I do, when you talk to people, they say, "Oh yeah, man, that was a tough call." Maybe they are okay with some of those calls and they're processing it properly. But it's the moral injury calls, the ones that, oh, did we do something wrong? Why didn't they call us quicker? Why did we have to slow down because someone cut us off at the intersection? That extra 30 seconds could have saved a life or something.
Yep.
So it becomes very difficult to start judging ourselves. And that moral injury, like I said, we title it wounds of the spirit. And those are all those emotions that we go through as human beings because we want to do well. We want to help others and save lives. And unfortunately, the calls that we see nowadays are a lot different than when I started in 1990. There's a lot more anger out there, a lot more shootings, fights, and stabbings, and people are angry. And to some extent, COVID had a lot to do with it as well, because we were told one thing by politicians, we were told another thing, and it goes to that moral injury. We feel betrayed by our government. Do we get shots? We can't get shots. If we don't get shots, then we're fired. So there's a lot of that going on as well in society, that moral injury of feeling betrayed by our country and our government when it comes to this COVID. So it's the dynamics, like I said, we're still in a learning process of it. And Chaplain Mark, in the second white paper, we will be talking about treatments. How do we treat those with moral injuries?
Well, that was going to be my kind of my second question was if listeners are listening right now, is this me? Do I have moral injury? Is there any kind of signs or what
Well,
you can see in yourself if you were experiencing that?
the signs are very similar to PTSD. They really are. And you become you carry a lot of guilt around a lot of things. You might not sleep. You're feeling a lot of stress and anxiety. And to that point where you start feeling guilty. And that's where I see those relationships issues when it comes to suicide. Guilt's a very powerful emotion. And if we feel guilty because we did something that caused our family to divorce and our kids hate us and things, it's just the dynamics are incredible. There's no doubt about it. And so we are going to be doing a thorough search and all those counselors out there that we can talk to in regard to treatment about moral injury. But I know Chaplain Mark, he runs the moral injury unit at Rush Memorial in Chicago. And so he has some great ideas and ones that he practices. So they're evidence based.
Right. So what could the fire service do better in regards to moral injury? What would be some tips that you'd provide our listeners with some ideas to improve their awareness and what firefighters can do to maybe that moral injury or even just prevent it in the first
Well, I
place?
think it's important. Everyone always talks about conferences, and I'm sure you've heard it too. We need to change our culture. I love firefighter. I don't want to change our culture. Our belief here at FBHA is we want to enhance it, and you enhance that through education. And that's what we're trying to do is educate people about all these different things that we've been studying. And one of them is that moral injuries, to understand it, educate yourself, and to talk about it. Let's start talking about these things. Hey, we had this baby drowning. How are we feeling? Is that a trauma related? Or is that more of a moral injury because you have children at home and maybe you had a child that died and now you're trying to save this child through your loss and you can't save that child. So now that moral injury is even more amplified because, hey, I couldn't, now that's two kids I couldn't save. And so, like I said, the ones that hurt here, not here from what I see, and it's the ones that I feel and hear. And that's important to discuss. Where does it hurt? What do you feel you could have done better on those aspects? And so constantly talk about these things. I shouldn't say constantly, but to be aware of it, these situations that come up, that it's okay to talk about it and keep on learning. Remember, we're only for us, and we're only 12 years, 13 years into understanding behavioral health in the fire service. Chief, coming up through the ranks and years ago that we never talked about behavioral health
Sure.
and suicide. That just wasn't, it wasn't ever on the radar for us. We got 250, 300 years in the fire service. We got a lot of catching up to do.
Yes, indeed.
And you can see evidence of how we have progressed because in 2010, when I was starting to study about PTSD and suicide, the only real therapy that anyone talked about was CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a talk therapy thing. And people would say, hey, that's what we use for PTSD. It's the best. Now we know differently.
Right.
There's EMDR, there's equine therapy, there's brain performance. There's just so many different type of therapies out there now that we can use for our people. We still have a long ways to go. There's no doubt about it.
Yep. Yeah, I personally, I think it's pretty exciting times with the amount of modalities out there that first responders have access to now, and almost on a daily conversation. I don't know, it's exciting times. It's definitely different than just the PTSD and one treatment. There's so many different things out there for, like you said, the equine. I personally think I've done it myself, and wow, what an experience that was to work with horses and to connect with them on a deeper level.
The key word that you said there in those statements was exciting. It is an exciting time. We should not look at this in a negative connotation. We should be positive, saying, hey, look what we're learning to help save our brothers and sisters. We should not be damaging them because they get into this fire service or the EMS world or dispatch. We shouldn't be damaging. We should be making sure that they're taken care of. And, it's a quote I use all the time is that I want you to have a great career, but I want you to have a better retirement. We should be taking care of it. So it is an exciting time. Let's keep this positive. It's not a negative.
No,
You know,
I
the, ne-
agree.
the negative is when we lose people.
I agree. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I personally believe this is a conversation we should have every day with our members. And suicide, that S word, people don't even want to broach that word. It's just stay away with it. Don't even ask them if they're suicidal. But now it's changed where it's no, just be upfront with them, and it's probably going to be a better outcome by being honest and just speaking the truth versus beating around the bush.
I think it's difficult because we are never trained on how to talk to our brothers and sisters. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It's not hurting. Hurting means I run into that wall 5 times.
Yeah,
And if you've never asked a loved one or a friend, are you thinking of killing yourself? It's damn tough to do.
it is. Yeah.
Most people are afraid because they're afraid the person's going to come back and say, geez, I hadn't thought about that. Do you think I should? And I've come to know pretty well 30 brothers and sisters over these last 13 years. And unfortunately, 19 of them ended up still falling prey to their demons and took their lives. But we've always had conversations. And you asking that person, are you thinking about killing yourself? That was never the motive for them to take their lives. They had deeper seated issues than that. Let's not be afraid to ask them. And let's not be afraid to walk the walk with them. Provide resources for your friends and your brothers and sisters you work with. Organizations, like I said, have a complete behavioral health program. And so these things, like I said, they're coming around. It's going to take time. You know as well as anyone, Chief, we are impatient people. We want things done right then and there. That just can't happen because we're dealing with people.
Yeah. In society in general, we want it now. We want it now.
Absolutely, it is. And you were right. Suicide is a word that people, it is actually completed, not committed. A lot of people say, yeah, committed suicide. It's completed or died by suicide. But when we first started, man, we're a not for profit. And so it's a struggle for funding and things for us. Even today, when we first started, I'd approach fire manufacturers, and they say, man, Jeff, we love what your mission is, but suicide's a negative connotation against our business. I had one organization write back and say it was not much of a return on investment for them. How do you say that?
Yeah.
You've donated to an organization that we've done tremendous work. We keep very low key. We don't, when we get the thank you letters from families or kids, we don't go put them on the Facebook. We're very confidential and things. So how do you say that to us, that there's no return on investment? You're saving a life. And you're right. There is no price on that.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Like I said, this journey that my wife and Karen, she volunteers 30 to 40 hours a week. Without bride, FBHA does not run.
Wow. Wow. Saying that, how could people support the Alliance and support you moving forward? What's the best ways to do that?
For us, I have a hard time asking for money and donations. I would be a very poor man if I was to say, because I'm just not that type.
Yes.
And so, just for us, any type of donations or just do some fundraising, golf, or whatever it is would be absolutely appreciated. There's no doubt about it. And I think one of the biggest things, though, is just get people out there to know about us. Like I said, we stay very low key because it is suicide. And we also realize this is a family issue first, and it will always be a family issue first. And so, but like our white paper, if people have it, share it with other fire departments and to get it out there. And in regard to that family first, I can't tell you, Chief, the amount of phone calls I get. Firefighters wanting to know how they can get their chief to really not hide the suicides and things. Let's talk about it. And you just don't know. Maybe families don't want anyone to. We see that because we know that there's no obituaries printed. No one wants to talk about the situation. So that's why it's so important for me to keep confidentiality with the chiefs. If in these past 13 years, if I had ever let one department out or one name out, we would have been done. Here at FBHA, we take great pride and I'm the only one who's seen the data. It's not like we pass it around to our instructors and things, because I made that promise to those chiefs that we'll keep that very confidential.
Amazing work you're doing. Amazing work. You talked about the difference between committed and died by suicide. Maybe just for the listeners, why is that important in the language?
Is because, and there's a lot of words that I've had to change. One of the three objectives when we started FBHA was not only the workshops, but we have a scholarship program for children or spouses going back to school. But our third one was our greatest endeavor that we felt we needed to accomplish, and that's called Those Left Behind. And it's our annual weekend retreat for family survivors. And it's always held the third month of May. And that's where I started really learning a lot about the terminology, because the families were going through issues. And so committed sounds like they did something wrong. Where completed means, yes, they had this idea and they went forth and completed suicide or died by suicide. It's a softer way of admitting that a loved one has died by their own hand instead of committed, which indicates guilt. You committed a crime. Well, it's not. And so like even words like trigger, I won't say that word more, because that's where I learned in one of the retreats many years ago. I said, when you heard that, did that trigger any response of your loved one? And they direct, and I love people who are direct, said, Jeff, I try not to use that word anymore because I'm the one who found my son who took his life with a firearm. So that's why I try to pass it around to people. And at first I thought what stimulated that thought, but then that we have a lot of people on addictions. So my word I use is catalyst. What's the catalyst for them? And so that's just some of the things I'm trying to do and pass on to others. So it's either completed, die by suicide, or what catalyst? What was the catalyst that brought up that memory instead of what was the trigger that brought up that memory? It's more sensitive to the survivors.
Yeah, the power of language is amazing. So that can totally change somebody's reaction to the words you're using, right?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, our weekend retreat, we actually hold a national We Remember night on the third Friday. And we've had organizations across the U.S. and Canada join us. So what happens is that my wife finds a big house that we can put like 18, 19 bedrooms, and families from across the US come together and they bond. And the power is incredible. These are some of the bravest people I've ever met because they open up their hearts to each other. They open up their hearts to new families and talk about the pain, the loss. And then on the Friday, about 8:45 local time, wherever we're at, we go down to the local fire department and I go live on Facebook. And then I say a few words and then we pay in the families who hold pictures of their loved ones and they state their name. And then we get a bagpipe, maybe play an Amazing Grace. And then at 9 o'clock, the department will run their lights for 1 minute to say, we remember our fallen brothers and sisters. This year, we're in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And like I said, we have hundreds and hundreds of organizations across the US and Canada that join us. Dispatchers who hold candles. And just about a month ago, we got a certificate of recognition from the governor of Nevada for that effort. That's
Wow.
called We Remember. So
How special.
it really is. And so something like that. Yeah, we put the brochure out on our Facebook page and LinkedIn and things. If people could share and join in, and then just send some pictures or some videos of their rigs with their lights. When you show the families, it's just they have tears in their eyes because they know this organization up in Canada is running their lights so that they remember their son. It's amazing, sir.
Yeah. I can imagine the moving emotions that would be felt across North America at that moment. So,
Absolutely. And it's a global situation too, right?
yeah.
It's a global issue. Well, that's what people can do to help out FBHA
Yeah.
and our families.
Appreciate that. In the show notes, I'll have all the links to all your resources and to find out more information about your organization for sure.
Great.
So, I asked you about firefighters? What can they do better for moral injury? How about for suicide? What's some things we could improve on like you said, where we don't keep the culture, but we want to enhance it. So, how could we enhance our knowledge about suicide and how we approach it?
It's such a difficult subject, isn't it?
Sure is.
This is a brother or sister we worked with one day and the next day they're gone. And it carries a lot of emotions. What did we miss? Why didn't they come and talk to us about these situations? So I always say, hey, let's put pride to the side. It's time to put pride to the side and reach out. And one of the phrases I've coined about three major phrases. One is cognitive disconnect. And what that means to me is that we base decisions on the emotions we're going through at that moment, and reality goes right out. And so let me give you an example. We've all come across that one firefighter somewhere in our careers that when they put the uniform on, they act like they walk on water. They go to the store, they got their job shirts on, and people, oh, thank you for what you do. You're heroic, you're courageous, you're brave. Our children want to be like you. And you have parades and, the big tower ladders and the engines and the ambulances, and we throw out candy and we got water pistols and everyone loves us. But then this particular firefighter goes home to the one who knows them the best and doesn't put them on that pedestal. And then maybe in the heat of an argument that escalates so quickly, so fast, this cognitive disconnect comes into play and their thought process is, why can't you treat me like John Q. Public? And maybe they pull out a gun then and shoot their loved ones and then themselves, murder, suicide. We've had 65 of those in our data.
Wow.
But it doesn't have to be anger. It could be guilt. It could be jealousy. It could be struggling from depression, PTSD, whatever that moment is, whatever that emotion is at that moment that they feel that either to get rid of their pain or they think their family will be better off. We know hundreds of family members through these years of doing our retreat. I have yet to hear any family member said, man, I'm glad they're gone because life is a lot better now. But that's the cognitive disconnect moment where that emotion takes over. And so, the other term I really push is internal size up. I coined that back in 2012. And what that means is that we need to ask ourselves two questions every day as first responders. Why am I acting this way? And why am I feeling this way? And the best thing you can do is listen to others because they see us better than we will ever see ourselves. My wife knows in a heartbeat when my tone of voice, my facial expression and things is, hey, you've had a rough day. You can't put it past them. But you also have to listen to your body when you're not sleeping, you're stressed, you start drinking or whatever, an addiction. Your body's telling you, hey, Jeff, you need some help. Go get it. So we have to listen to those telltale signs. And then, like I said, we have to have that bravery that when we run into a building, we have to have that same courage and bravery to say, I need help. And so that's what we try to teach in our workshops. Back in 2010, you could not find too many organizations that were talking about behavioral health.
Yeah.
And now there's just hundreds and hundreds of them out there. And kudos to them for the work that they're doing. What makes us different is not only the data collecting, but 90% of all our workshops, and we have now 9 workshops on different avenues, come from our brothers and sisters. I've traveled over 900,000 air miles across the U.S. and Canada. I've driven well over 50,000 miles on the road truck, just stopping at places and visiting. And it's just incredible what we've learned.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things I know for myself when I was going through organizational burnout. There was one of the key things I noticed was I didn't listen to my body. And listening, your body is pretty intelligent and it tells you a lot of key issues, what's going on. And I think it's a message I share as well, as listen to your body, listen to it's giving you key messages to what's going on in life and your capacity and your thresholds and everything. So,
I should have known when my hair started falling out that body was telling me something.
exactly. Yeah, going gray, right?
Like gray and old.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's all right to laugh at ourselves, right? If we have OCD or something, it's okay to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves so seriously.
Yes.
Reach out when we are struggling, when we are going through those personal challenges in our lives, our professional challenges. And that's that cultural brainwashing, that term, a phrase in 2010, that when we put this uniform on, we're expected to act in a manner, right? Brave, courageous, give help, don't ask for help. I handle all things on my own. Who expects that? Our brothers and sisters we work with, the communities we serve, and the traditions of the fire service dictate this is how we're supposed to act. And when you're expected to go through these challenges by yourself, it's darn difficult to do, sir. You see why so many have sleep issues in regard to the schedules. We have addiction, PTSD, emotional relationships, and even suicidal ideations and losses. So it's very difficult. It's a long, dark journey when you go down the road in regard to behavioral health, because understanding our minds is challenging.
How much information would you suggest that a new recruit gets about mental health, suicide, all these things that potentially could happen in their career? What kind of, where would you say is the limit to telling them when they first join? Should you be totally honest and tell them everything? Or should you sugarcoat it?
Absolutely. Because as well as I do, sir, starting way back when I got in the fire service, and all of us who got in there, we knew the inherent dangers of the job. The fires, explosions, accidents, slips, falls. We knew those dangers. We were never told about stress and anxiety and depression and PTSD and suicide and things. We in our academies in Vegas, 2 hours. They get 2 hours of one of our workshops. FBHA donates I do our workshops and I donate that to them. You got to let them know that it's okay because we're here for you now. Our peer support, our chaplains, we're here for you. And we want you, like I said, have a great career, but you need to step it up too. You're feeling those things that you have to ask for help because, we can't go around knocking at your door every day. Hey, how'd you do? How's things going? So you do have some onus. And this is our greatest time, Chief. It's our greatest time in the fire and EMS world to not only make changes for our organizations, but for ourselves. And the resources that are available, the thousands and thousands of counselors now that have taken training to understand our world, and the different types of therapies. So it's, like I said, it is exciting times, like you stated earlier. It truly is.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel totally blessed to be able to be in the position I am now to kind of share what I've learned and just to spread open that conversation up. I feel blessed to be in the position I'm in where I can do that now.
And it's appreciated. It's appreciated by the listeners that you have on your show that write to you and say, hey, thanks for, talking about a difficult subject on your show. That's where you know that you've succeeded because you took someone's life, one person, and they listened, and then they can pass that on to another person, maybe two, and it just spreads like a wildfire.
So we're coming up to the end of our conversation. It's been great. I think very important topics for everyone to listen to, even outside the fire service. What would be some closing remarks, but more along the lines of a challenge to our fire service that we could learn from you?
I would say I'm very big on this. Build or strengthen your relationship bonds with your support system at home. Talk to them. You can do those internal size ups together at home with your spouse, your partner, your children. Say, hey, what emotions did I go through today? How did I display those? And how did it affect you? And listen to them. And because, like I said, they see us. Build those bonds and relationships with your partners or your spouses. Because I will tell you from talking to just thousands of our brothers and sisters and experiencing it myself, once you retire, those phone calls, they start to drop from your brothers and sisters you work with. It's nice to have your support system at home walking that path of retirement with you. Not, oh man, now I'm divorced after retirement and things. So build your relationships with your support systems, your loved ones at home, your children. It will pay off years down the road.
Couldn't agree more. Love it. Yes. Well, Jeff, it's been a pleasure chatting with you tonight, and I really appreciate the work your organization does, you and your wife, and keep up the good work in spreading that message across North America.
Chief, I appreciate it. I'm honored to be on your show here. Please know you're doing some fantastic work. Even though you might not know it, I tell people this all the time. I'll know the ones I lose. I'll never know the ones I save. And just keep on believing in your doing the work that you have been asked to.
Yes. It's the purpose of life moving forward. I have a favorite saying, seek what sets your soul on fire. And I think what I'm doing right now is I found what sets my soul on fire.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, just keep following the path, sir.
Yeah. You as well. You as well. All right. Stay well.
Take care, sir.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.